From today onward, stay out of the projects. When you get involved, we lose the contracts. Got it? Stop meddling and just stick to making documents. Watching Michael's back as he walked away, I felt the weight of my own helplessness. I work as a security consultant, protecting systems from threats. But my overly meticulous nature made me the office oddball, shoved to the corner. In short, I was the proverbial desk jockey nobody wanted to deal with. No one approached me. No one spoke to me. Days filled with whispers and pointed fingers behind my back. Isolation had become my norm. Then one day, a newly appointed female manager gave me an assignment, a business negotiation with a major food company. This client had a reputation as an impenetrable fortress, where even veteran salespeople had failed. I believe you're the right person for this. Do your best. At the meeting, I precisely identified the vulnerabilities in their system. My analytical skills stunned their corporate lead. Why has someone with your ability been stuck in the shadows? At our company, we'd offer you a package 5 times your current salary. How about it? I was headhunted with an unprecedented offer. From that moment, my life took a complete 180-degree turn. My name is Dylan. I work in the system development division of a security consulting firm. Our job is to create systems that protect companies from external attacks and data breaches, and to sell those solutions. From antivirus measures to preventing unauthorized access and encrypting data, we ensure system security through various methods. What makes this work fascinating is that no two systems are ever alike. Each company uses different software, manages data differently, and has unique information to protect. Standard solutions don't work here. Understanding the unique personality of each company and crafting the optimal security measures. That was the unwavering principle I was determined to uphold. But others don't seem to share this vision. Since I was a child, I've been labeled a weirdo. I look at things from unconventional angles. I think about details too deeply. That's what people have always said about me. I consistently scored at the top in intelligence tests. An IQ test I took in elementary school showed a score of 145, and I was once told I had extraordinary talent. But that high IQ often worked against me. I'd overanalyze the essence of things, making conversations with others feel out of sync. I questioned things too much, even about the obvious, and people said I lacked common sense. In the end, my high IQ was just a number, a factor that made it harder for me to connect with people. Even at work, I was an outlier. Dylan? I never understand what he's talking about. That presentation last time? No idea what his point was. Even the clients seemed lost. Oh yeah, remember when they straight up said, "Sorry, I don't get it. Can someone else take over?" I heard whispers like this every day from my colleagues. Then one day, it happened. "Dylan, got a minute?" Called into a conference room by my manager, Michael, I sat silently, staring at the table. From today onward, stay out of the projects. But, do I have to spell it out for you? Michael sighed in exhaustion. When you get involved, we lose contracts. Think about last month's case and this month's case, every single deal falls apart the moment you step in. We've built these relationships with painstaking effort, and you ruin them in an instant. Michael's words hung heavy in the suffocating air. Did you get it? Stop meddling and just stick to making documents. Watching Michael's retreating back, I felt the sting of my own powerlessness. Proposals no one understood, explanations completely out of sync with what people wanted, and comments that froze the atmosphere in meetings instantly. Before I knew it, I was labeled the guy who says unnecessary things. As a result, my desk was quietly relegated to the corner near the window. While the other employees' desks were clustered like islands, mine stood alone, isolated. One of the colleagues jokingly says, "That's Dylan's private seat. No one wants to sit there." After hearing things like that repeatedly, I stopped expecting anything from people or from work. There was no point in engaging with others, and it never went well anyway. If engaging with others would only lead to failure, then it was better to keep interactions to a minimum. I stopped caring about people. With that thought, I turned back to my computer, content with being alone. And then it happened. "Hey, Dylan!" The loud voice behind me made my shoulders tense involuntarily. Only one person in this company would call out to me like that. When I turned around, there was Joshua, one of my colleagues, standing with his usual cheerful smile. "You're so energetic in the morning, Joshua. Still doing security checks first thing in the morning?" Classic you. Joshua began talking happily, completely oblivious to the atmosphere around him. He worked in the same development department as me, but we were polar opposites in personality. He was the sociable type who could get along with anyone and explain technical concepts in ways everyone could understand. You could say he had an incredibly high social intelligence. "Oh, by the way, that security hole you found the other day? The client was thrilled when we reported it." "I see. That's good," I replied curtly, but Joshua continued without hesitation. "You know, Dylan, you always find vulnerabilities that I'd never notice. Your technical skills are insane. More people should know how amazing you are. It's not that big of a deal." Embarrassed, I mumbled a vague response. But Joshua looked at me with a serious expression. "No, really. Your knowledge is vital for this company. You should be more confident about it." He said it with his usual warm smile. Joshua was the only one in the company who actively engaged with me. At first, I honestly found his attitude annoying. But there was something undeniably genuine about his words. I gradually came to understand that he genuinely respected me. Joshua became the quiet yet steadfast presence who supported me, even as I kept my distance from others. That was the kind of person Joshua was. "Hey, Joshua." "Yeah? What's up? Why do you care so much about me? You know I'm a bit of a weirdo, right?" At my question, Joshua's usual smile faded, replaced by a distant look in his eyes. He leaned back in his chair, as if bracing himself to answer. "Do you remember last year, when it came out that I grew up in an orphanage?" "Yeah." That day was still vivid in my memory. It was during the company's year-end party when Joshua's background became a topic of discussion. Joshua's father had abandoned the family before he was old enough to remember. The shock of it seemed to take a toll on his mother, who fell ill and eventually passed away. With no relatives on his father's side, Joshua was placed in his maternal grandparents' care. But they, too, passed away early due to illness. Joshua, left completely alone in the world, was placed in an orphanage. Looking distant, as if recalling those times, Joshua continued speaking in a calm, steady tone. "Back then, a senior colleague said, 'Oh, so that's why Joshua's like that. Kids raised in orphanages lack love and tend to act needy.' Then others chimed in, saying, 'Makes sense, or he's always so desperate at work. It must be because he grew up in an orphanage.'" With a wry smile, Joshua went on. "But you were different. You stood up for me. You said, 'Don't judge someone just by their background.'" Joshua studies security harder than anyone and makes proposals with the clients in mind. Deciding who he is based on his past environment is just missing what really matters as a person. You were the only one who had my back like that. Ah, that's right. I remembered now. I was so angry at the time that I couldn't stop myself from speaking up. I've always been judged as just that kind of person because I grew up in an orphanage. It's something that's frustrated me for as long as I can remember. We can't understand who someone truly is just by their background. We have to see the person for themselves. You don't judge people so easily. You take the time to really see what's inside. That's why I know your dedication to your craft isn't misplaced." Joshua adjusted his chair back upright and looked straight at me. "The words you said to me back then really meant a lot. That's why I want to make sure I see you for who you are, too. So yeah, that's why I believe in your so-called weird dedication. It's definitely not a waste. Scratching the back of his head with an embarrassed grin, Joshua let out a laugh. His words made my chest feel unexpectedly warm. In early April, when the cherry blossoms were in full bloom, we learned that our department head would be replaced as part of the company's personnel changes. Good morning. As of today, I'm appointed as the new head of the System Development Department. My name is Grace. The commanding voice that echoed across the floor made us instinctively straighten our backs. Standing before us was a woman clad in a sharp black suit. Her refined features were framed by sleek black hair that fell gracefully to her shoulders. She looked to be in her early 30s. She was undeniably beautiful, yet carried an intimidating air. Grace's first impression was unmistakably strict. We'd already heard rumors about her tenure at her previous post. Apparently, Grace revolutionized her last department. She even eliminated overtime but had no mercy for anyone who wasn't efficient. Yeah, I heard she's like a beautiful drill sergeant. These rumors had spread through the office well before her arrival. However, Grace's approach turned out to be slightly different from what we'd anticipated. While she was indeed strict, her sternness stemmed from a clear sense of judgment and precision. A few days after her appointment, a department meeting was held. The agenda was to review and revise the security measures for each division. Now, I'd like to hear your opinions on the current security settings, Grace said, scanning the room. No one raised their hand. I gripped the documents on the desk tightly, staying silent. I figured anything I said would just reinforce my reputation as the oddball. Dylan. To my surprise, my name was called, and I looked up. Grace was looking directly at me with an expectant yet firm gaze. You must have some thoughts on this matter, don't you? I read your report the other day, and it offered a fascinating perspective. Had she actually taken the time to read my report? The weight of everyone's stares made me hesitant, but Grace's words gave me the courage to stand up. The current uniform security settings are causing inefficiencies in operations. For example, in the admin department, strict email attachment size limits are slowing down workflows. In the development division, access restrictions to the test environment are delaying progress. Meanwhile, in the HR department, where sensitive personal information is handled, stricter measures should be in place. Therefore, I believe we should customize the security policies for each department based on their operational needs. The room buzzed with murmurs. The familiar atmosphere of skepticism surrounded me. Here goes Dylan again, with his self-righteous ideas. I expected my proposal to be dismissed, as always. But then it happened. Dylan is absolutely right. At first glance, this approach seems time-consuming, but by tailoring security to each department's needs, it will actually improve efficiency, Grace said, siding with my proposal. The meeting room fell silent, as if a pin had dropped. But what about the workload? Short-term workload versus long-term security. Our department should prioritize the latter. I believe Dylan's proposal aligns perfectly with that principle. Grace cast a sharp glance at the reluctant colleagues. And she turned back to me. Dylan, how about presenting this idea to the HR department? Her unexpected proposal left both me and the others stunned. But, even if I present it, don't worry. I'll support you. True to her word, Grace set up a meeting with the HR managers a few days later. Until the day of my presentation, she stayed late to review my materials. She meticulously revised every word on the slides, aligning the phrasing with the perspective of the HR team. Sometimes she'd suggest, it would be clearer if we included a diagram here, helping refine my explanations. This part of the explanation is. Grace tapped the pen against her fingertips thoughtfully, then suddenly brightened as if an idea had struck her. Dylan, try explaining this as if you're talking to an elementary school student. An elementary school student. Startled by her suggestion, I hesitated. Grace tucked her sleek black hair behind her ear and smiled gently. Yes. After all, the HR team members aren't system experts. In fact, many of them likely struggle with IT. So, keep it simple enough for a child to understand without being condescending. She locked eyes with me, her gaze encouraging yet firm. For example, how would you explain it? Well, I thought for a moment before beginning. For the data redundancy system, I might say, think of homework. You write it in your notebook, save it on your mom's computer, and back it up in the cloud. Managing it in 3 places might seem tedious, but even if you lose the notebook or the computer crashes, you'll always have a copy somewhere. That's the same principle we use to protect critical company systems with triple backups. Would that work? Grace's face lit up with a broad smile. Exactly. Start with a relatable analogy to convey the basic concept, then transition into the technical details. With this approach, even those unfamiliar with IT will feel confident following along. Then for the firewall explanation. Yes, please. Let's revise the materials with this approach. I'm sure the HR team will understand the importance of the system. Her expression softened slightly as she spoke. Dylan, you're incredibly skilled, but because of that, you sometimes overlook what's obvious to others. What's normal for you isn't always normal for everyone else. But if you can translate your advanced knowledge into simple, relatable terms like this, it becomes a powerful tool. Her words made me open my eyes wide in realization. I see. I had always assumed that as long as my explanations were technically accurate, they would get across. But to truly connect with others, I needed to question my own assumptions and reframe my ideas from their perspective. It wasn't a compromise, but it was the essence of effective communication. Let's reorganize the other security topics, starting with the basic concepts, to make them easier to understand. Balancing technical integrity with clarity. The challenge fascinated me, and I found myself fully immersed in the process. On the day of the presentation, I stepped into the meeting room to find the HR team waiting with unexpectedly serious expressions. Grace introduced me. Dylan, our security specialist, has a proposal that ties directly to boosting revenue. Her opening remarks successfully captured their interest. As I began explaining, they followed along intently, nodding as they flipped through the materials. After the presentation, Richard, the HR department head, approached me. Dylan, that was an excellent presentation. I never imagined you could explain things so clearly. I used to think of you as the quiet guy who always looked serious. His expression showed genuine interest in my proposal. When word of my successful presentation spread through the company, colleagues started reaching out to me more often. Dylan, can I run something by you? One of our clients has this issue. Dylan, what do you think about this configuration? Before I knew it, people were gathering around my desk. No one called me a weirdo anymore. Dylan, looks like things are going great for you. Joshua said one day, grinning mischievously. Grace is truly amazing, isn't she? And I mean that as a compliment. He was absolutely right. Grace had created an environment where I could thrive. More than that, I felt like I had started to change, little by little. I could express my thoughts more naturally than I ever could before. As I reflected on this, I found myself feeling a deep sense of gratitude and respect for Grace. Just then, Joshua, with an expression far from his usual cheerful demeanor, looked a little bashful. You know, I've been thinking about Grace. She's so capable, beautiful, and that kind smile she shows every now and then, she's practically perfect. He admitted, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. It was rare to see Joshua, usually so fearless, blushing at just the mention of Grace's name. Sensing his embarrassment, I teased, "Oh, don't tell me you're falling for her?" Joshua immediately flustered, waving his hands in denial. "What? Don't be ridiculous." But his ears were bright red, betraying his true feelings. One day, Grace called Joshua and me into her office. "I've received an inquiry from Horizon Industries about a potential deal." Joshua and I exchanged surprised glances. Horizon Industries is a major food manufacturer with a nationwide presence. Recently, they've expanded into logistics and retail, growing into a company with annual revenues exceeding $1 billion. However, the company was known to be conservative in IT matters, with numerous attempts to revamp their security systems falling through over the years. Many veteran salespeople have visited Horizon Industries in the past, but they've all been turned away. This time, I want to try a different approach. With Dylan's expertise in security and Joshua's communication skills, I believe we have a real chance. "Wait, you want me to handle the negotiation?" I asked hesitantly, and Joshua clapped me on the shoulder. "Hey, Dylan, don't be so timid. Grace chose us for this. Grace, leave it to us. The two of us will seal the deal. I'm counting on you," she said with a smile. The next day, on the train to the meeting, Joshua stared out the window, his voice uncharacteristically reflective. "Hey, Dylan, Grace really believes in us, doesn't she?" "Yeah." He clenched his fist in determination. "All right. Let's make this work. We've got to deliver for her." Hearing those words, I couldn't help but smile. Sure, I was nervous, but Grace believed in us, and I had Joshua by my side. That alone gave me a little confidence. When we arrived at Horizon Industries headquarters, the head of their systems department, George, greeted us. He appeared to be in his mid-50s. He was a man with a calm demeanor yet sharp, penetrating eyes. "Thank you for coming all this way today." In the conference room, Joshua started the presentation with his signature charm. "Let me share a quick analogy about your core system." He began with a friendly smile. "Imagine a house with a front door and a back door. The front door has the latest, strongest lock, but the back door is still using an old, outdated one. It creates a vulnerability, doesn't it?" Seeing George nod in interest, Joshua handed over the explanation to me. "In your case, the link between your logistics management system and your sales management system is akin to that back door. Specifically, there are areas where data encryption is insufficient, leaving room for potential malicious interference. The worst-case scenario could involve inventory data manipulation. That's why we propose a phased security setup tailored to each department. To put it simply, think of each department as a floor in a high-rise building." I used specific examples to make the concept as clear as possible. When I finished, George folded his arms and closed his eyes. A long silence followed. Joshua leaned forward slightly, anticipating a reaction. Finally, George opened his eyes and turned to me with a smile. "An impressive analysis. This is the first time someone has identified our vulnerabilities so precisely. Who came up with this security strategy?" "It was Dylan here," Joshua said with a smile, gesturing toward me. George stood up and leaned slightly toward me. "I'm truly impressed. Every proposal we've received so far has only scratched the surface. But you're different. You've pinpointed the core issues in our system. Dylan, how about joining our team?" "What? Why would someone as capable as you have been overlooked until now?" "Perhaps your current company isn't the right fit for you. If you join us, we'll ensure you're compensated accordingly. How does 5 times your current salary sound?" The sudden offer left the room in stunned silence. I could hear Joshua sharply inhale beside me. It was undeniably an extraordinary offer. But I bowed my head respectfully and replied, "I'm honored by your kind offer, but I must decline. I have a boss at my current company who has supported and believed in me. It's thanks to her guidance that I've been able to grow to the point where you would value me this highly. Considering the debt of gratitude I owe her, I cannot accept your proposal." "I see." George looked momentarily disappointed but soon broke into a gentle smile. "Although I'm sad to hear that, I'd still like to proceed with this deal. In fact, discussions about system updates have already been circulating internally. Your proposal provides fascinating insights for our considerations. Let's set up another meeting soon." "Of course. We look forward to it," Joshua and I replied, bowing in unison. We left the conference room and boarded the train. Joshua let out a big sigh. "Dylan, you're incredible. 5 times your salary, and you turned it down?" That response of yours, though, it was seriously cool. "I just said what I felt," I replied simply, turning to look out the window. As the scenery outside changed, I couldn't help but think of Grace. When we returned to the office, the entire floor was waiting for us. Grace approached us with a nervous expression. "How did it go?" "We got a strong response. George said he'd like to arrange another discussion soon." As Joshua made the announcement, the entire floor erupted with cheers and excitement. "No way! Horizon Industries? That super conservative company? Wow, Dylan and Joshua pulled it off." The employees were all bursting with exclamations of surprise and excitement. Joshua, brimming with pride, chimed in. "That's not all. Dylan got scouted. He was offered 5 times his salary. But he turned it down flat, all for Grace." "Joshua." I tried to stop him, but it was too late. "Wait, seriously? You turned down an offer like that, Dylan?" Amid the growing commotion, Grace cleared her throat. In an instant, the floor fell silent. "Both of you, you've done an amazing job." "Thank you." She bowed deeply, and Joshua and I exchanged glances before grinning. Later that evening, the company's executive director, Stephen, visited Grace's desk. It was rare to see Stephen on the floor, and the entire office seemed tense. "Grace, I heard about Horizon Industries. Outstanding work. Keep up the great results." After Stephen left, Grace glanced around the floor, smiling sheepishly. "It's all thanks to everyone's efforts. I'll be counting on you all moving forward." Her words warmed my heart. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Choosing to work under her was one of the best decisions I'd ever made. To celebrate landing the major deal, our department organized a drinking party. I usually avoided such gatherings, but this time was different. I could genuinely feel that everyone was happy for us. The private room at the bar was lively, the usual workplace tension replaced by laughter. Joshua entertained everyone with humorous anecdotes about the negotiation, while senior colleagues reminisced about their past challenges. As the party reached its peak, I noticed Grace sitting next to me. Clutching my glass, I spoke up. Grace, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity and believing in me." Grace smiled warmly and set her glass down. "Dylan, you're the one who did all the hard work. I didn't do anything. You've always been capable. So it would have been a waste not to let that talent shine." She paused briefly, her expression turning slightly concerned. "But are you really okay with your decision? Turning down Horizon Industries' offer with such favorable terms?" "Yes. The person I am now is thanks to you, Grace," I replied without hesitation. Grace looked momentarily surprised but quickly softened into a gentle smile. "You're such a good person." Feeling a bit embarrassed, I returned the smile, this time genuinely from my heart. Even the lively atmosphere around us felt comforting. "Hey, what's this? You two look like you're having fun." Joshua appeared with a beer mug in hand, grinning as he joined us. "Grace, you're drinking tonight?" That's rare, you usually leave early. Well, tonight's special. Everyone worked so hard. When Grace replied, Joshua plopped himself down beside her with a wide grin. Grace, you've got a cute side to you, huh? Oh, Joshua. Grace said with a chuckle, shaking her head. And Joshua leaned in closer. Your glass is empty. Let me refill it for you. Thank you. So, Grace, what do you usually do on your days off? Well, I read a lot. Really? I've just gotten into reading myself. You'll have to recommend something for me. Listening to their conversation, I quietly sipped my drink and glanced around the room. The lively gathering was drawing to a close. Colleagues in a tipsy mood chatted happily. A warm sense of unity I'd never felt before filled the room. Let's wrap it up with a final toast, someone suggested. With that, the party ended, and people began to leave in groups. As I stood to grab my coat, Grace approached me. Dylan, you live nearby, don't you? Grace called out to me. Yes, about 10 minutes from the west exit of the station. I see. If it's all right with you, would you mind walking with me? I'm heading that way too. Her voice sounded unusually soft, almost hesitant. Puzzled, I nodded. Of course. Outside, the chilly night breeze brushed against our cheeks. The streets were quiet, lit only by the soft glow of streetlights. Grace suddenly stopped walking. Dylan, do you remember when we first met? Last summer, at the cafeteria in the main office. I had just returned from the branch office and couldn't figure out how to use the new water dispenser. You came over and helped me. Her words triggered my memory. Yes, I do remember. I spoke to you because you seemed confused about the different buttons for cold and hot water. The nostalgic memory surfaced clearly in my mind. Under the glow of the streetlights, Grace gave me a gentle smile. That's right. I still remember it vividly. You explained, the buttons are designed differently, so people can choose their preferred temperature. Then, you even helped me figure out the temperature that was easiest for me to drink. She looked up at the night sky, a self-deprecating smile crossing her face. At that time, I had just been reassigned to a new department. I'd driven away several capable subordinates because of my own stubbornness. They were all skilled workers, but I thought there was only one efficient way to work, my way. I dismissed anyone who didn't fit into that mold as incompetent. Grace exhaled slowly, then turned her gaze back to me. But your words made me realize something. Everyone has their own way of working. There's a place where each person fits best. Understanding that and providing tailored support is a leader's responsibility. It's not just about demanding efficiency, but it's about nurturing individual strengths and trusting their potential. There's no single way to bring out the best in people. Adapting to each individual is what truly matters. You taught me that, Dylan. Thank you for opening my eyes. The night breeze passed between us, the streetlights casting long shadows of our figures on the ground. I couldn't find the words to respond, but I felt a warmth spreading in my chest, filling me with an unfamiliar sense of pride and gratitude. Before I realized it, words began to spill from my lips. When I was a kid, people always told me, just do things like everyone else. I was criticized for asking too many questions in class, for overthinking, for not reading the room. Over time, I started to believe that being different meant I was a failure. As the night wind blew, I found myself sharing thoughts I had buried deep inside. Hearing this, Grace shook her head emphatically. That's not true. Those differences of yours are what make you special. Thinking differently, seeing things from another perspective. That's exactly why you can notice problems no one else does. It's a remarkable quality. Individuality should never be dismissed. It should be cherished and developed. Your differences will surely help someone someday. Her eyes, illuminated by the streetlights, shone with sincerity. Her words struck a chord deep within me. And I felt my eyes start to burn with emotion, and I smiled. I hadn't felt happy naturally like this in a long time. Before I realized it, we had arrived in front of Grace's apartment building, where she came to a stop. The tall structure loomed against the night sky, its silhouette reaching upward. She stopped and turned to me. "Would you like to come in for some tea?" "What?" "No, I mean." My voice accidentally cracked. I waved my hands frantically in refusal, and Grace chuckled softly. "Don't worry, Dylan. I trust you." Well. Caught off guard, I could only stammer out an awkward response. While I was flattered by her trust, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. What am I even thinking? I scolded myself internally. I glanced at her face. Under the soft glow of the streetlight, her profile looked breathtakingly beautiful. My heart started pounding uncontrollably. I need to get to bed early, so I'll head home. "See you Monday." I blurted out my goodbye and hurried off. I thought I heard Grace's laughter behind me as I walked away. Since that day, I found myself walking Grace home more often. "Good evening." I greeted her one night as I waited at the west exit. By now, it felt natural, though I remembered how nervous I had been at first. We'd talk about work or share light-hearted conversations as we walked. The 15 minutes to her home felt like a strangely peaceful routine. "Dylan, you really love your work, don't you?" "Yes. I think of security as a way to protect a company's personality." "Still the same as ever." She smiled softly, her profile glowing under the streetlights. "Lately, even other employees would comment, 'You and Grace seem pretty close, huh?' But to me, Grace was a figure of admiration, a goal to strive for, and most importantly, the person who had recognized my individuality and worth. Still, whenever her apartment building came into view, I couldn't help but feel a small pang of loneliness. "See you tomorrow." "Yes, take care." Those simple, everyday exchanges had become irreplaceable to me. The negotiation with Horizon Industries, initially framed as a security review, steadily progressed. At first, the meetings had a stiff and formal atmosphere, but over time, they grew more relaxed and friendly. "Recently, I've taken up mountain climbing on weekends," George casually mentioned after one of our meetings. The mood in the conference room shifted, softening as the conversation moved away from work. "Really? That's surprising. Climbing is perfect for stress relief. When you see the view from the summit, your daily worries feel so small." Joshua latched onto George's unexpected hobby. "I've always wanted to try climbing." "What mountains would you recommend for a beginner?" "Well, for beginners, I'd recommend Mount Takao. There's an excellent restaurant near the observation deck." The conversation shifted from work to hobbies. From there, it naturally expanded to favorite restaurants and preferred foods, flowing effortlessly. The atmosphere among us had evolved beyond that of mere business partners. We now felt more like acquaintances, or even close friends. "Dylan, Joshua, I'm glad I get to work with you. I'm counting on you both going forward," George said as we wrapped up the meeting. His warm smile conveyed genuine affection. Over time, these casual conversations with the seasoned George became one of the small joys of my work. However, there was something troubling me. It was Joshua. "Good work today, Joshua," I said after a Horizon Industries meeting. "Yeah," he replied curtly, his tone distant. Lately, Joshua had been like this. He would leave quickly after meetings, often walking ahead without waiting for me. At work, the usual banter between us had all but disappeared. Today, as he moved to a different train car, I finally decided to confront him. "Hey, Joshua. Is something going on lately?" He glanced at me briefly before looking away. "Nothing." "Oh, by the way, for the next meeting with Horizon Industries, you should go on your own." "What?" "I've got more projects piling up, and you can't rely on me forever, can you? Just then, the train arrived at our stop. Without waiting for a response, Joshua headed straight for the ticket gate. It was true that I had been handling most of the preparation for Horizon Industries meetings alone recently. Even for other projects, we had started working separately. The official reason was efficiency. But something didn't feel right. I couldn't shake the sense that Joshua's change in attitude wasn't just due to being busy. What that sense of unease meant, however, was still beyond my grasp. On the day of the next meeting, I headed to Horizon Industries alone. "Oh, is Joshua not coming today?" George asked at the start of the meeting, his tone one of genuine curiosity. "Yes, it seems he's been quite busy with other projects lately." "Is that so?" George tilted his head, a hint of sadness flickering in his gaze. "Dylan, has something happened between you and Joshua? Lately, the two of you seem a bit strained." "It's noticeable." "No, it's just work-related adjustments." I trailed off, avoiding his eyes. George lowered his gaze and let out a deep sigh. "That's a shame. I miss the camaraderie you two used to share, it was refreshing. Still, I have high hopes for your proposal, Dylan. Let's keep pushing forward with this deal." I nodded, but a lingering unease remained in my chest. The work was progressing, yes. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something important was slipping away. A few nights later, as Grace and I walked home together, I decided to bring it up. "Grace, can I ask you for advice about Joshua?" "Joshua, yes, I've been concerned about him too. He's been acting differently lately, hasn't he?" Grace also came to a stop. Just then, the sound of footsteps approached from behind. Grace tensed for a moment, her body stiffening. However, the source of the footsteps quickly passed us by. It was an office worker heading home from work. Grace exhaled quietly, visibly relieved. "Grace? Are you okay?" "Me? I'm fine. But about Joshua, he's been leaving the Horizon Industries negotiations to you, hasn't he? You two used to be so close. What happened?" "That's the thing, I don't know either." We continued the conversation until we reached her apartment. "Let's talk about this more tomorrow." I nodded and said goodbye to Grace. However, after taking just a few steps, I thought I heard her gasp softly. Turning back, I saw her standing by the mailbox, her face pale. I rushed back to her side. "What's wrong?" "Dylan," she began, startled by my return. After a brief hesitation, she showed me the contents of her mailbox. Inside were several unmarked envelopes. "I've been finding these in my mailbox recently. And it's not just that, there are late-night calls from unknown numbers. Strange noises outside my apartment, and this constant feeling of being watched. I think I might have a stalker." Her words sent a chill through me. She pulled out her phone. On the screen, there were multiple suspicious call records from unknown numbers. I went to the police, but they said they couldn't investigate without clear harm being done. She said, her voice faint. Seeing the usually composed and confident Grace looking so vulnerable was jarring. I made up my mind. "Grace, please rely on me. Protecting others is what I do. It's the essence of my work. I promise I'll keep you safe. Dylan," she said softly, a small, relieved smile appearing on her face. From that night on, I made it a point to be extra vigilant during Grace's commute home. I ensured she got into her apartment safely each evening. Afterward, I'd patrol the area around her building, checking for anything unusual. This routine became my new normal. Meanwhile, the deadline for the Horizon Industries negotiations loomed ever closer. With multiple projects overlapping, my workload had increased significantly, leading to long days and late nights. I used to share the workload with Joshua, but now I had to handle everything on my own. In the office, it was just me and Grace. The soft clattering of keyboard strokes echoed through the quiet floor. Still working overtime, Grace? Yes, I still have to finish the end-of-month department report. Plus, it's a little scary to go home alone. She replied, glancing up at me with a faint blush on her cheeks, or so I thought. I shook my head, telling myself it was just my imagination. And I stood up. I need to clear my head a bit. I'll go to the convenience store. Do you need anything? Thank you. Could you get me a coffee? Stepping outside, the warm early summer breeze brushed against my face. The glow of a nearby convenience store stood out against the dark night. At that moment, I sensed someone's presence in the shadows of the building. It was unmistakable, someone was watching me. There was no mistaking it. I held my breath and approached the source of the presence. To my shock, it was George. George! When I called him, he turned around, startled. Oh, Dylan. What are you doing here at this hour? Ah, just some personal business. Well, I should go. George muttered, avoiding eye contact, and quickly tried to leave. His retreating figure carried a melancholy air that I couldn't quite place. When I returned to the office with the coffee, I hesitated to tell Grace about what had just happened. Ultimately, I decided not to say anything. I didn't want to worry her unnecessarily. A few weeks later, chaos erupted early in the day. Angry shouts from a client echoed through the office. This is unacceptable. All the data we had yesterday is completely gone. Security measures? This has made things more vulnerable instead. The contract details don't match the actual configuration at all. The phones at customer support wouldn't stop ringing. Complaints poured in one after another, leaving the entire floor in chaos. Employees moved frantically, their faces marked by confusion and panic. Just then, the meeting room door burst open. Grace! What's going on? The number of complaints has already exceeded 20 companies. Stephen, the executive, shouted angrily as he stormed in. Grace stepped forward, her posture firm despite the tension. My apologies. We are currently assessing the situation. Assessing? This isn't the time for such leisurely talk. I need solutions now. Yes, but we need to understand the situation first. I don't want excuses. If you can't resolve this, you'll be stepping down as department head. Stephen's harsh words froze the entire floor. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows highlighted the tension on Grace's face. After Stephen stormed out, Grace turned to me. Dylan, can you identify all the clients who filed complaints? Following her directive, I quickly dove into the data. As I reviewed the list of clients, a sense of unease crept in. This is... Dylan, did you find something? Grace, all these accounts were new contracts acquired by Joshua within the past 6 months. Grace furrowed her brow. Let's check the contracts. We began pulling up the agreements from the database one by one. When I saw the details, my heart sank. The numbers. The security settings in the contracts showed eerily similar figures. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that some values were identical down to multiple decimal places, as if it had been copied from a single template. Other discrepancies became apparent: server capacity misaligned with actual needs, excessively complex network configurations for smaller clients, and claims of cost efficiency with no supporting evidence. Joshua, what is the meaning of this? Grace's voice trembled with anger. Joshua remained silent, staring at the floor before mumbling in a faint voice. It always worked out before. I used Dylan's contracts as a base, changed the numbers, and figured we could fix things later during implementation. Dylan always adjusted everything meticulously during deployment, so I thought it would be fine if I just borrowed the templates. Grace stood speechless. I was equally stunned. It was true that when drafting contracts, I was thorough to a fault. I had meticulously analyzed client workflows, measured system usage frequencies, and accounted for future scalability to calculate the most accurate figures. Often, I worked late into the night, running countless tests and revising the numbers multiple times. As a result, post-implementation issues were almost non-existent. I stood up and turned to my keyboard, determined. Carefully, I began reviewing the complaint data, client by client. Grace, leave this to me. First, I'll analyze the system's operational status. Each company has different peak times for their workloads, so I can redesign the server load distribution. Multiple graphs lit up on the screen, showing patterns and trends. For example, Company A has critical operations early in the morning, while Company B peaks in the evening. By leveraging this time difference, the same server resources can handle both without issue. This will maintain stability while keeping costs down. I quickly entered data. Only the sound of my rapid typing broke the tense quiet as I worked to stabilize what had been thrown into chaos. Then, I'll also optimize the security levels based on each company's actual needs. For instance, Company C handles a lot of external access, so I'll implement two-factor authentication for them. Meanwhile, Company D primarily operates internally, so we'll prioritize usability in their settings. Are you sure this will work? Grace asked, her voice tinged with concern, and I nodded confidently. Yes. I already had a good grasp of each client's requirements. I reviewed all the previous meeting notes thoroughly. By the end of the workday, I managed to draft a comprehensive set of corrections. These proposals were promptly sent to the respective clients. The first response came early the next morning from Company A, the first to lodge a complaint. There were issues with the previous contract details, but this new proposal is highly satisfactory. I'm particularly impressed with the server adjustments tailored to our peak order processing hours. Thank you for your prompt and thoughtful response. Shortly after, Company B also reached out. The detailed figures lend credibility to your plan. It's clear that you understand our operational structure well. With this proposal, we feel confident in trusting this to your company. Positive feedback continued to roll in. Company C praised the two-factor authentication, while Company D appreciated the usability-focused design for their internal systems. Dylan's proposals are meticulously tailored to each client's specific needs. And to think he managed to craft all these corrections in just one day. Stephen remarked, flipping through the thick stack of reports in astonishment. Beside him, Grace let out a small sigh of relief. Despite the successful responses, the office remained busy late into the evening, the clock already well past 10 p.m. From a corner of the floor, I overheard tired voices. Oh, staying this late, what a drag. This is all Joshua's fault, isn't it? He's always been all talk. Maybe his sales numbers were fudged too. Can't trust a guy like that. Honestly, he should just quit and take responsibility for this mess. As the whispered accusations grew louder, the atmosphere on the floor turned heavy. Suddenly, Grace's firm voice cut through the tension. Now is the time to focus on resolving the issues. If you have the energy to gossip, you should head home for the day instead. Under Grace's stern gaze, the employees gossiping lowered their heads in silence. They offered small, apologetic nods before quickly gathering their belongings and leaving the office. As Grace watched their retreating figures, her face showed signs of exhaustion. Yet, her eyes remained resolute, unwavering in their determination. With the departure of the gossiping employees, a sudden calm returned to the floor. Grace quietly approached Joshua, her steps measured and deliberate. Joshua, we need to talk. Why did you do this? Her voice carried both weariness and a trace of kindness. Joshua, staring at the floor, began speaking in a trembling voice. At first, I just meant to use Dylan's documents as a reference. But it was so easy to close deals that way, and you always praised me for it. Joshua's excuse-laden words trailed on, his voice filled with desperation. Hearing this, Grace furrowed her brows. That's not what I'm asking, Joshua. I want to understand why. You've been acting strangely for a while now, almost avoiding Dylan altogether. Suddenly, Joshua's expression twisted into anger. It's all your fault, Grace. You like me, but you're spending all your time with Dylan instead. What? What are you talking about? Grace's voice froze with disbelief. I, too, was stunned. What was Joshua saying? Every day, you walk home together, laughing like you're having the best time. You don't even look at me. What is this? Are you trying to make me jealous? If so, congratulations, you succeeded. I tried to tell you how I felt, so I sent letters, called you over and over. Even waited outside your house. No way. Grace's face turned pale. Reacting instinctively, I stepped between her and Joshua. Get out of my way, Dylan. Stop, Joshua. Can't you see you're scaring her? Shut up. You don't understand anything. My parents abandoned me. I was bounced around from one foster home to another. No one has ever needed me. Suddenly, tears streamed down Joshua's face as his voice broke. Why is it only you? Even if others don't understand you, at least you have Grace who does. When you mess up, someone always has your back. But me? No one ever sees me. All I want is to be loved, to feel needed. He slammed his fists on the desk. So, I worked like hell to boost my numbers, to get Grace to notice me. But no matter how hard I tried, I could never be like you. I could never have someone who cared for me like that. Ever since I was in the facility, it's been the same. You were abandoned by your parents, you're unwanted, they'd say. I tried to believe it wasn't true, so I forced myself to fit in, to act cheerful. To please everyone, but no one ever saw the real me. His voice broke into sobs. And he sank to the floor, his shoulders trembling. I'm all alone in this world. I've never been needed, never been loved. But Grace, you smiled at me. At least, I thought. I could matter to you. His words carried the weight of profound loneliness and despair. As though years of bottled-up emotions had come flooding out. No, Joshua. You're completely wrong about not being needed by anyone. I said firmly, my voice calm but resolute. Joshua looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. I stepped closer and continued. You saved me, Joshua. When everyone treated me like an outcast, you didn't. You listened to me, tried to understand me. You didn't roll your eyes or get bored when I talked endlessly about security. If it weren't for you, I'd still be the guy sitting in the corner, talking to no one. Your understanding helped me change little by little. I need you. I placed a gentle hand on his trembling shoulder. And your father has always been watching over you too. What? George. From Horizon Industries. He's your father. Joshua's eyes widened in shock. George told me the story. 30 years ago, when he was co-running a business, it suddenly went under. As a co-signer, George was saddled with a massive debt. At the time, you were only 2 years old. Staying with you and your mother would have dragged you both into poverty. To protect you, he had no choice but to disappear. I paused, letting the weight of the story sink in. He changed his name, cut ties, and pretended you didn't exist to keep debt collectors away. He worked tirelessly to pay it all off. But by the time he did, your mother had passed, and you'd been placed in a facility. He couldn't face you after severing those ties. Still, he wanted to be close to you, so he transferred to Horizon Industries' regional office. When he saw you during a meeting, he told me, "Seeing my son grown up and doing well, it was the happiest moment of my life. The sky outside the window was beginning to brighten with the first light of dawn. I continued speaking, my voice steady. Even after you stopped showing up at meetings, he kept worrying about you. That's why he often lingered near the office late at night. He wanted to make sure you were okay. He told me he just wanted to see you, to know you were doing well. No way. Large tears rolled down Joshua's cheeks. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking as sobs overtook him. I've been such a fool. I let jealousy consume me, hurt others to feel validated. And all along, someone did care about me. Someone was right there. Wiping his tears, Joshua stood and turned to Grace. He bowed deeply. Grace, I'm so sorry. The letters, the calls, the stalking, it was all me. I know it's unforgivable, but... He faltered, overwhelmed with emotion, but Grace smiled gently. It's okay. You were just lonely, trying to be recognized. It just happened to be me. But now, it's different, right? You have someone who truly sees you for who you are. You don't have to suffer alone anymore. Yes, from now on, I'll make sure I never disgrace him again. And I'll never trouble Dylan again, not ever. Joshua said, bowing repeatedly as he wiped away his tears. There was a newfound strength in his words, a resolve that hadn't been there before. Grace nodded, her smile warm. Then let's leave this incident behind us. Instead, show me your true potential. You have a talent for understanding clients' needs. Use that strength in the right way. I believe in you and your worth. Tears welled up again in Joshua's eyes. Thank you, Grace. I'll earn back your trust and meet my father with pride. As dawn broke, its light reflected in Joshua's tears. A month has passed. The setting sun bathed the office in a golden glow. Joshua and I were poring over a monitor, reviewing contracts together. We'd been at it for nearly an hour, meticulously checking every detail. Can you explain the basis for these cost calculations again? Joshua asked, pointing at the screen. I nodded and began explaining carefully from the beginning. First, you analyze the client's system usage. For example, this company has a sales department with 100 employees. Their peak access time is concentrated in the morning, so that's why this number makes sense. Got it. He took notes diligently. Working alongside Joshua like this had become a regular occurrence. Sometimes we would stay late, verifying data together right up until the end of the workday. This had become the new normal. Client trust was gradually being restored. In fact, the number of new contracts was now higher than before. Even the voices of employees who once gossiped about Joshua had shifted. I'm sorry. One of them said during lunch, approaching Joshua's desk. We didn't know anything and just said whatever we wanted then. You've really turned things around, Joshua. I heard there are far fewer problems now, and you're putting a lot of care into each contract. Clients are saying great things about you. Honestly, we've been learning a lot from you lately. Joshua shook his head with an embarrassed smile. No, really, I should be thanking you all, he said with a shy grin. The shadows that once clung to Joshua were nowhere to be seen. The negotiations with Horizon Industries had proceeded smoothly, and today, we finally signed the contract. As the pen was lifted from the contract in the Horizon Industries conference room, I let out a quiet sigh of relief. This officially seals the agreement for the core system redevelopment project. George nodded solemnly. Yes, this is a significant step for our company. You've helped change the mindset of our once conservative team. Dylan, Joshua, you both did an excellent job. No, we're just honored to have achieved this dream of working with Horizon Industries. When Joshua responded, George stood, shaking our hands firmly. When he shook Joshua's hand, his own was visibly trembling. Still holding Joshua's hand, George hesitated before speaking. Joshua, I've kept quiet about this until now, but I'm your father. Joshua stared at him silently, his eyes locked on George. George looked down, his voice heavy with emotion. You wouldn't remember me, since we parted before you could even form memories. When we reconnected through this negotiation and I saw the incredible work you've done, I couldn't have been prouder. But as a father, I've done nothing for you. I should have raised you with love and care, but instead, George's voice faltered, and his eyes glistened with tears. Joshua finally spoke. I already know everything. Dylan told me about how you worked so hard to repay your debts while still thinking of me. I know now how much you cared. From now on, I'll be a son you can be proud of. So please, keep watching over me, Dad. Tears streamed down Joshua's face as he spoke. George said nothing, but opened his arms wide. Without hesitation, Joshua stepped into his embrace. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I kept quiet and watched this moment of reconciliation. The emotions of 30 years poured out into the stillness of the conference room. It was about the time the streetlights began flickering on. I was walking home with Grace as usual. Since then, I haven't received any more strange calls or letters. And that unsettling feeling of being watched is gone too. Grace said, her voice soft as she gazed up at the starry sky. The realization that the stalking incidents had ceased brought a sigh of relief from me. Grace, standing beside me, lowered her gaze slightly and spoke softly. The other night, at the office party, when I asked you to walk me home, it was because of the stalking. It was late, and I was scared. I see, so. I began, but stopped myself mid-sentence. I couldn't bring myself to finish the thought, fearing that saying, I guess you don't need me to walk you home anymore, would make it real. Under the streetlight, a quiet pause lingered between us. Dylan, I'd like you to keep walking me home. Grace murmured, her voice softer than usual. I looked at her in surprise. The stalking may have stopped. But these walks with you have become something very precious to me. She continued, gazing at the night sky. Every evening, you listen to me with such care. You've tried to understand my work struggles, my doubts, and everything. You've understood me in a way no one else ever has. People have always called me harsh, but you saw it as a strength, as part of who I am. You were the first person to truly accept me for who I am. That's why I want to keep being with you. That's my honest feeling. The streetlight illuminated Grace's eyes, which glimmered with clarity and depth. Our shadows stretched long as we walked side by side. I stopped in my tracks and turned to face her directly. I've always avoided getting too close to people. I've never clung to anyone before. But for the first time, I've realized I don't want to be apart from you. I want to stay with you, to be by your side. Under the light of the street lamp, Grace's cheeks faintly reddened. Dylan, why don't you come up to my place? Tonight, I want to stay with you. I nodded slowly. Then, I gently took her hand in mine. In the quiet of the evening, under the fading night sky, our two shadows intertwined. Everyone carries something unique about them. For a long time, I saw my differences as flaws. Not being able to behave like everyone else made me feel like I was defective, like I didn't belong. But I was wrong. Joshua excels at connecting with people, while I specialize in meticulous details. These differences aren't about better or worse. They're complementary strengths. Grace showed me that such differences are assets. When individuals embrace their distinct traits, a team becomes stronger. There is a place where everyone can shine by being their true selves. Grace embodied that truth, showing it through her actions. Being different from others is never a bad thing. When we acknowledge and embrace each other's differences, building relationships that draw strength from them, that's when we truly become strong.